Katie Blake pressed her face against the small window of the diplomatic ship and watched the alien planet grow larger. Her hands shook as she held her notes. This was her first real job after finishing school, and she was about to meet aliens. Real aliens from another world. "You look nervous," said Dr. Lisa Grant as she sat down next to Katie. The older woman had kind eyes and graying hair. She was the ship's scientist who studied alien life. "I am nervous," Katie said with a small laugh. "What if I mess up? What if I say something wrong?" Dr. Grant smiled. "You'll do fine. Just remember what we learned about their culture. The Crithari, like respect and formality. Don't make sudden moves and always wait for them to speak first." Katie nodded and looked at her notes again. The Crithari were a reptile-like species from a hot, dry planet. They were much taller than humans and very strong. Their government was military-based, which meant soldiers had a lot of power in their society. Commander Jake Morrison's voice came over the ship's speaker system. "All crew to stations. The Crithari shuttle is approaching. This is first contact, people. Let's make a good impression." Katie stood up and smoothed her blue diplomatic uniform. She had practiced walking in her formal shoes for weeks, but she still felt awkward. Dr. Grant gave her shoulder a gentle squeeze. "Remember, you're here to take notes and observe. You don't have to talk much, just be polite and stay calm." They walked together toward the main conference room. The ship felt different now that aliens were coming aboard. The crew moved with purpose, checking equipment and preparing for the most important meeting in human history. Lieutenant Ryan Davis stood guard outside the conference room. He was young like Katie, but he carried himself like a soldier. His hand rested near his weapon, though Katie hoped they wouldn't need it. "They're big," he whispered to Katie as she passed. "Much bigger than we expected." Inside the conference room, Captain Nick Torres was arranging chairs around a long table. The room had been decorated with flags from both Earth and the Crithari homeworld. Everything looked official and important. Commander Morrison entered wearing his best uniform. He was an older man with gray at his temples, and he looked confident. Katie wished she felt half as sure of herself. "Everyone ready?" he asked, looking around the room. "Remember, this meeting could decide the future relationship between our species. The Crithari are proud people. They respect strength and honor above all else." Katie took her seat at a small desk in the corner where she could take notes without being in the way. She had her tablet ready and several backup pens. Her job was to record everything that happened for the history books. The ship shuddered slightly as the alien shuttle attached to their docking port. Katie's heart began beating faster. Through the thick walls, she could hear metal doors opening and closing. Heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway. "They're coming," Lieutenant Davis announced from his post by the door. The footsteps grew louder. Katie had read that Crithari were heavy, but hearing it was different from reading about it. Each step sounded like a hammer hitting the floor. The conference room door opened and Katie forgot how to breathe. The first alien through the door was huge. He stood nearly 8 feet tall with dark green scales covering his skin. His head was elongated like a lizard's, with yellow eyes that seemed to glow. He wore what looked like a military uniform covered in medals and symbols. Behind him came a smaller alien, though still much taller than any human. This one wore robes instead of a uniform and moved more gracefully. His scales were lighter in color, almost blue-green. "Welcome aboard the UES Harmony," Commander Morrison said, standing and bowing slightly. "I am Commander Jake Morrison, representing the United Earth Alliance." The alien in robes stepped forward and returned the bow. "I am Ambassador Zeleth of the Crithari Empire. Thank you for hosting this historic meeting." His voice was deep and had a strange hissing quality, but his English was perfect. The larger alien said nothing. His yellow eyes moved around the room, studying each human like he was deciding which one to eat first. Katie tried to make herself smaller in her corner chair. "And this is General Vorthak," Ambassador Zeleth continued, gesturing to the huge alien. "He commands our border fleets and speaks for our military." General Vorthak's eyes found Katie in her corner. She felt like a mouse being watched by a snake. The general's lip curled, showing sharp teeth. Your species is smaller than we expected, General Vorthak said. His voice was even deeper than the ambassador's, and he spoke like he was stating a fact rather than making conversation. Commander Morrison kept his polite smile. Please, have a seat. We have much to discuss. The aliens sat across from the humans at the long table. Even sitting down, General Vorthak was taller than any of the standing humans. Katie noticed that the chairs creaked under his weight. Dr. Grant leaned forward with interest. We're very excited to learn about your culture and technology. This is a wonderful opportunity for both our species. Ambassador Zeleth nodded. Indeed. There is much we can share. Our scientists are particularly interested in your space travel methods. General Vorthak made a sound that might have been laughter, but it sounded more like a growl. Your ships are slow and fragile, like their builders. An uncomfortable silence filled the room. Katie stopped writing and looked up from her tablet. Commander Morrison's smile became more forced. Our technology may be different, but it has served us well, the commander said carefully. We've successfully traveled between many star systems. Yes, General Vorthak said, leaning back in his chair. We know. We've been watching you. Your expansion into space has been noted by the Empire. The way he said noted made Katie's skin crawl. It didn't sound like friendly observation. Ambassador Zeleth shot a look at the general, then turned back to the humans. What General Vorthak means is that we've been aware of your growing presence in this region of space. The Empire believes it's time for formal contact. That's wonderful, Dr. Grant said, though she looked less certain than before. We hope this can be the beginning of a long friendship between our peoples. General Vorthak's yellow eyes fixed on her. Friendship requires equals. What can your weak species offer the Krathari Empire? Katie's pen stopped moving across her tablet. She looked up to see the general staring directly at her again. His gaze made her feel cold all over. Captain Torres shifted in his seat, his soldiers' instincts clearly on alert. Lieutenant Davis remained by the door, but Katie could see his hand had moved closer to his weapon. Commander Morrison kept his voice steady. Humans have many strengths. We're innovative, adaptable, and we work well together. Our diplomatic history shows we can be valuable allies. Diplomatic history, General Vorthak repeated with what sounded like amusement. You mean your history of fighting wars among yourselves? Very impressive. Katie wanted to disappear into her chair. The meeting was going badly, and she could feel the tension growing in the room. Ambassador Zeleth looked embarrassed by his companion's behavior, but he didn't seem able to control the general. The general continued staring at Katie while he spoke. Look at them, Zeleth. So small and soft. This one in the corner looks like she would break if I breathed on her too hard. Katie's face burned with embarrassment and fear. She tried to focus on her notes, but her hands were shaking too much to write clearly. Dr. Grant cleared her throat. Perhaps we could discuss the scientific exchanges we mentioned in our preliminary communications. But General Vorthak wasn't finished. He stood up from his chair, his full height making the humans look like children. Before we waste time on science, let's discuss territory. Your ships have been seen near systems the Empire considers ours. The room felt smaller with the general standing. Katie realized she was holding her breath and forced herself to breathe normally. This was not how first contact was supposed to go. Commander Morrison stood up slowly, trying to match the general's height but failing by several feet. General Vorthak, I think there may be some misunderstanding about our territorial movements. We've been careful to avoid any systems claimed by your empire. General Vorthak's yellow eyes narrowed. Careful? Your survey ships were detected in the Kepler system just 2 months ago. That system belongs to us. Katie looked up from her tablet, surprised. She had read the mission reports, and the Kepler system wasn't on any list of Krathari territory. Ambassador Zeleth seemed uncomfortable, shifting in his seat and avoiding eye contact with both the general and the humans. The Kepler system showed no signs of Krathari presence, Dr. Grant said carefully. Our long-range scans detected no artificial structures or communication signals. Because we chose not to reveal ourselves to you, the general replied with a hiss. We have been watching your kind for longer than you know. Your clumsy ships make noise across half the galaxy. Katie wrote down everything, but her hands were still shaking. The general kept glancing at her, and each time his gaze felt like ice water in her veins. She tried to make herself invisible in her corner chair. Captain Torres spoke for the first time. With respect, General, our ships follow all standard space travel protocols. We announce our presence and scan for existing claims before entering any system. General Vorthak turned his massive head toward the captain. Your protocols mean nothing to us. The Empire does not recognize human authority over anything. The words hung in the air like a threat. Katie saw Lieutenant Davis tense by the door, his hand moving imperceptibly closer to his weapon. The diplomatic meeting was turning into something much more dangerous. Ambassador Zelith finally spoke up. Perhaps we should focus on establishing clear boundaries going forward. The Empire is willing to discuss territorial agreements. No, General Vorthak said firmly. There will be no agreements between equals because we are not equals. Humans will accept imperial authority over this region of space, or there will be consequences. Commander Morrison's diplomatic smile disappeared. General, we came here in good faith to establish peaceful relations. We're not looking for conflict. Of course you're not, the general said with what sounded like laughter. Look at you, soft creatures in your metal shells, barely able to survive in the void without your machines. You have no choice but to avoid conflict. Katie's tablet slipped in her sweaty hands, making a small noise as she caught it. General Vorthak's attention snapped to her immediately. The small one is nervous, he observed. Good. Your kind should be nervous around your betters. Dr. Grant leaned forward, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. General, you seem to have strong opinions about human capabilities, but you've never actually encountered humans in combat situations. How can you be certain about our limitations? The general's laugh was like rocks grinding together. We have studied your military conflicts. Your weapons are primitive, your tactics are weak, and your soldiers are fragile. A single Krathari warrior could defeat a dozen of your best fighters. Captain, Torres's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. Katie could see the anger in his eyes, but she also saw him fighting to control it. Starting a fight here would be the worst possible outcome. Your physical development is inadequate, General Vorthak continued, beginning to pace around the table. Each step made the floor vibrate slightly. Small bones, weak muscles, thin skin. Your species survived only because your planet had no real predators. Katie tried to focus on her notes, but the general's pacing was making her nervous. Every time he passed behind her chair, she felt like prey being stalked. Ambassador Zelith looked increasingly uncomfortable. General, perhaps we should discuss trade opportunities. Both species could benefit from resource sharing. What resources could they possibly offer us? The general asked, stopping his pacing to loom over Dr. Grant. Their technology is centuries behind ours. Their raw materials are common throughout the galaxy. They have nothing we need. Dr. Grant looked up at the towering alien without backing down. We might surprise you. Human innovation has always been our greatest strength. We solve problems in ways others don't expect. General Vorthak bent down until his face was level with hers. Katie could see his sharp teeth and smell something like sulfur coming from him. Innovation? You mean desperation. When the weak cannot survive through strength, they become clever, but cleverness only delays the inevitable. Commander Morrison stepped forward. General, I think this discussion has moved away from diplomacy. Perhaps we should take a break and reconvene later. No, the general said, straightening to his full height. I want to settle this now. Your species needs to understand its place in the galactic order. Katie reached for her water glass, trying to stay hydrated despite her nervousness. Her hands were still shaking, and as she lifted the glass, it slipped from her fingers. Water and glass scattered across the floor with a loud crash. The room went completely silent. Everyone turned to look at Katie, who felt her face burning with embarrassment. She immediately got down on her hands and knees to clean up the mess. I'm sorry, she whispered, gathering pieces of broken glass. I'm so sorry. General Vorthak stared down at her with disgust. Perfect example. he said to the other aliens. Clumsy, weak, apologetic. This is what humans are. Katie's embarrassment turned to anger, but she kept her head down and continued, cleaning. She could feel tears of frustration building in her eyes. The female cannot even hold a simple object, the general continued. How could such creatures ever pose a threat to the Empire? Ambassador Zelith said something in the Krathari language that sounded like a warning, but General Vorthak ignored him. Look at her, the general said, pointing at Katie as she crawled around collecting glass. Weak, frightened, submissive, your entire species in one pathetic display. Captain Torres started to stand, but Commander Morrison put a hand on his shoulder to stop him. The situation was already bad enough without adding violence. Katie finished cleaning and stood up, glass pieces cupped in her hands. She moved toward a waste container in the corner, trying to stay out of everyone's way. But as she walked, General Vorthak continued his commentary. Notice how she tries to make herself small and invisible. Prey behavior. Your species still carries the instincts of creatures that spent millions of years hiding from real predators. Dr. Grant's voice was tight with controlled anger. General, Katie is a civilian diplomat, not a soldier. Judging our entire species, based on one person in a stressful situation is hardly scientific. One person? The general asked. I see the same weakness in all of you. The commander tries to hide behind diplomacy. The soldiers try to look strong, but their hands shake. The scientist asks questions instead of taking action. All weak, Katie disposed of the glass and returned to her seat, but she could still feel the general's eyes on her. Her tablet had been damaged in the spill, and some of her notes were wet and smeared. She tried to salvage what she could while the argument continued around her. The Krathari Empire has dealt with dozens of species across the galaxy, General Vorthak said, resuming his pacing. Some joined us willingly, others required persuasion, a few needed to be conquered, all eventually learned their proper place. Commander Morrison's voice was steady but cold. And what place would that be for humanity? The general smiled, showing all his sharp teeth. Servants, if you're lucky. Your colonies would make acceptable mining worlds under imperial supervision. Your people could work in our factories. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Katie stopped trying to fix her tablet and looked up at the faces around the table. Even Ambassador Zelith looked shocked by his general's words. That's not acceptable, Commander Morrison said quietly. General Vorthak stopped pacing and turned to face him. It's not your choice to make, human. The Empire will expand into this region regardless of your preferences. Your cooperation would make the process easier, but it's not required. Katie felt something cold settle in her stomach. This wasn't first contact anymore. This was a threat. Katie stared at her broken tablet, trying to make sense of what she had just heard. The general was talking about enslaving her entire species like it was a business decision. Her hands clenched into fists without her realizing it. Commander Morrison stood up straight, his diplomatic mask finally slipping. General Vorthak, I think you've made your position clear. We need to end this meeting and contact our respective governments. Your governments, General Vorthak said with amusement. Multiple weak groups fighting among themselves. The Empire is unified under one strong leader. That is why we will win. Captain Torres could no longer stay quiet. You seem very confident for someone who's never actually fought humans. The general's yellow eyes fixed on him like laser beams. Are you challenging me, small soldier? I'm stating a fact, Torres replied, not backing down. You're making assumptions about an entire species based on limited information. General, Vorthak took a step toward him, his massive frame casting a shadow over the captain. Limited information? We have observed your wars, your weapons, your tactics. Everything about your species screams weakness. Katie watched the confrontation build, her heart pounding. The situation was spiraling out of control and she felt helpless to stop it. She tried to gather her scattered notes, but her hands were shaking again. Dr. Grant attempted to diffuse the situation. Perhaps we could arrange some cultural exchanges. Both species might learn from each other if we spent more time together. Learn. What? the general asked, not taking his eyes off Torres. How to be weak. How to negotiate when we should conquer. The Empire has nothing to learn from humans. Ambassador Zelith finally stood up. General, please. We came here for diplomacy, not threats. Diplomacy is for equals, General Vorthak replied. I see no equals in this room. Katie bent down to pick up a pen that had rolled under her chair. As she reached for it, her damaged tablet finally gave up and clattered to the floor in pieces. The sound echoed through the tense silence like a gunshot. Every eye in the room turned to her. Katie felt her face burn with embarrassment as she scrambled to collect the broken pieces of her tablet. This was the most important meeting in human history, and she kept making mistakes. Again, General Vorthak said with disgust. The clumsy human breaks another fragile human device. How appropriate. Katie's embarrassment began to mix with anger. She had worked hard to get this job, studied for months to be here, and this alien was treating her like she was stupid just because she was nervous. Leave her alone, Captain Torres said firmly. She's doing her job under difficult circumstances. General Vorthak laughed, the sound like gravel in a blender. Her job? Taking notes while the adults talk? Even your children could do that better. Katie stood up, still holding pieces of her broken tablet. The general's words hit her like a slap in the face. She had graduated top of her class, earned her position through merit, and she was tired of being dismissed. I'm not a child, she said quietly. General Vorthak turned his attention to her, seeming surprised that she had spoken. What did you say, little human? Katie's heart was racing, but something inside her had reached its limit. I said I'm not a child. I'm a trained diplomat with a degree in interspecies relations. The general looked amused. A degree in relations with species you had never met? How useful. More useful than making threats without understanding who you're threatening, Katie replied before she could stop herself. The room went dead silent. Everyone stared at her in shock, including Katie herself. She couldn't believe she had just talked back to the 8-foot alien general who had been threatening to enslave her species. General Vorthak's amusement disappeared, replaced by cold anger. What did you just say to me? Katie realized she had crossed a line, but it was too late to take it back. I said you don't understand humans as well as you think you do. Commander Morrison stepped forward quickly. Katie, that's enough. General, she meant no disrespect. But General Vorthak wasn't listening to the commander. His yellow eyes were locked on Katie, and she could see fury building in them like a storm. The small female thinks she can speak to me as an equal, he said, his voice low and dangerous. She needs to learn proper respect. Katie backed up a step, suddenly realizing how much danger she was in. The general was twice her height and probably 10 times her weight. His claws could tear her apart without effort. General, please, Ambassador Zelith said urgently. She's young and spoke without thinking. There's no need for violence. Violence? General Vorthak asked, taking a step toward Katie. I'm simply going to teach her about the natural order. The strong discipline the weak. It's a lesson all humans need to learn. Lieutenant Davis moved away from the door, his hand on his weapon. Sir, should I intervene? Commander Morrison held up a hand to stop him, but his voice was tight with worry. Everyone stay calm. This doesn't have to escalate. Katie continued backing up until she hit the wall behind her chair. There was nowhere else to go. General Vorthak loomed over her like a mountain of scales and muscle. Look at you, he said with satisfaction. Cornered, frightened, helpless. This is what your species truly is when faced with real strength. Katie's fear was mixing with anger again. She hated feeling helpless, hated being treated like she was nothing. Her college rugby coach had always told her that when you're scared, you either run or you fight. There was nowhere to run. You think strength is just about size, she said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. But you're wrong. General Vorthak's head tilted slightly, like he was studying an interesting insect. Am I? Then show me this human strength, little diplomat. Katie knew she should stay quiet, should apologize and try to calm the situation. But something inside her refused to back down anymore. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was stupidity. But she couldn't let this alien think all humans were weak. Strength isn't about how big you are, she said, meeting his yellow eyes. It's about not giving up when things get hard. The general's laugh was like breaking glass. Philosophy from a creature who drops her toys and spills her water. How inspiring. That was the final straw. Katie had endured his insults, his threats, his dismissal of her entire species. But being mocked for normal human nervousness while facing an 8-foot alien predator was more than she could take. You want to see what humans do when we're pushed too far? She asked, her voice getting stronger. You might not like what you find. General Vorthak's eyes narrowed. Are you threatening me, little human? Before Katie could answer, the general's massive hand moved faster than she expected. The backhanded blow caught her across the face and shoulder, sending her sprawling across the floor. The impact echoed through the room like thunder. Katie hit the ground hard, her head spinning and her face on fire with pain. She could taste blood in her mouth and feel it running from her nose. For a moment, everything went white with shock and pain. But then something unexpected happened. Instead of staying down, instead of crying or giving up like the general expected, Katie rolled with the impact and pushed herself back to her feet. Her face was bloody, and her shoulder ached, but she was still standing. General Vorthak stared at her in confusion. That blow should have knocked a human unconscious, should have sent her to the medical bay with broken bones. Instead, she was upright and angry. Is that the best you can do? Katie asked, wiping blood from her mouth with the back of her hand. The general's confusion turned to rage. No creature that small should still be standing after taking his full strength. No prey animal should be showing him defiance after being struck down. Katie felt something she had never experienced before. Pure crystalline anger mixed with adrenaline and the muscle memory of years playing contact sports. Her rugby coach's voice echoed in her head. When someone hits you, you hit them back twice as hard. General Vorthak raised his hand again, intending to finish what he had started. But Katie was no longer the frightened girl who had been taking notes in the corner. She was a human being who had been pushed beyond her limits. As the general's hand came down, Katie did something that surprised everyone in the room, including herself. She stepped forward instead of back, planted her feet like she had been taught, and drove her fist straight into the alien's solar plexus with every ounce of strength in her body. The sound of Katie's fist hitting General Vorthak's body was like a hammer striking a tree trunk. For a split second, nothing happened. The general stood frozen, his yellow eyes wide with shock as he stared down at the small human who had just punched him. Then his knees buckled. General Vorthak doubled over, gasping for air like a fish out of water. His massive hands clutched his stomach where Katie's fist had connected. The 8-foot alien warrior who had been threatening to enslave humanity was suddenly struggling to breathe. Katie stood there with her fist still extended, as shocked as everyone else. She had expected her punch to hurt her hand more than it hurt him. She had not expected the giant alien to fold like a house of cards. General Vorthak's legs gave out completely. He crashed to the floor with a sound like thunder, shaking the entire room. His breathing was ragged and desperate, and he kept trying to speak but could only make choking sounds. The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone in the room stared in complete disbelief at the fallen general. Ambassador Zeleth's mouth hung open. The other Krathari delegation members looked like they had seen a ghost. Dr. Grant was the first to move. She rushed toward Katie, checking her for injuries. Are you all right? Let me see your hand. Katie looked down at her knuckles. They were red and starting to swell, but nothing felt broken. I think I'm okay, she said in a daze. Is he okay? On the floor, General Vorthak was slowly getting his breath back, but he was still curled up in a ball. He looked up at Katie with something that might have been fear. The arrogant, threatening alien was gone, replaced by someone who suddenly understood he was not invincible. Captain Torres and Lieutenant Davis moved quickly to defensive positions, unsure if the fallen general's companions would retaliate. But the other Krathari seemed too stunned to react. They kept staring between their general on the floor and the small human woman who had put him there. Ambassador Zeleth finally found his voice. How is this possible? He whispered. General Vorthak is one of our strongest warriors. He has defeated creatures twice his size in combat. Commander Morrison was trying to process what had just happened. His young diplomatic aide had just knocked down an alien general with a single punch. This was either the best or worst thing that could have happened to human-alien relations. Katie, he said carefully, what exactly did you do? Katie flexed her sore fingers and looked at the general, who was now sitting up but still holding his stomach. I hit him in the solar plexus, she said simply. It's a nerve cluster. My rugby coach taught us that if someone bigger tries to hurt you, that's where you aim. Dr. Grant was examining Katie's split lip and bruised cheek where the general had hit her. Your coach taught you well, but Katie, do you realize what you just did? I defended myself, Katie replied, though she was starting to understand that it was more complicated than that. He hit me first. General Vorthak slowly managed to get to his hands and knees. He was breathing better now, but his voice was hoarse when he spoke. Impossible, he gasped. No creature that small should have such power. Katie looked down at him, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and confusion. Maybe you don't know as much about humans as you thought. The general struggled to his feet with help from his companions. He stood unsteadily, one hand still pressed to his stomach, and stared at Katie like she was a dangerous predator instead of a young woman with a bloody nose. What are you? He asked, his voice filled with something that sounded like respect mixed with fear. I'm human, Katie said simply, just like everyone else in this room. Ambassador Xylith stepped forward cautiously. General, perhaps we should call for medical assistance. No, General Vorthak said firmly, though he was still breathing heavily. I am not seriously injured, but I am confused. He looked at Katie with new eyes. How does such a small creature possess such devastating power? Dr. Grant saw an opportunity and took it. Maybe this is a good time to discuss the differences between our species. It seems there are things about human physiology that you don't understand. Katie was starting to feel the adrenaline wearing off, and her whole body was beginning to shake. The reality of what had just happened was sinking in. She had punched an alien general during a diplomatic meeting. Her career was probably over, and she might have just started an interstellar war. Commander Morrison seemed to read her thoughts. Katie, you acted in self-defense. No one blames you for protecting yourself. But Katie wasn't sure about that. She could see Lieutenant Davis and Captain Torres watching the Krathari delegation carefully, ready for trouble. The diplomatic meeting had turned into something completely different. General Vorthak slowly lowered himself into a chair, wincing as he sat down. He kept staring at Katie like he was trying to solve a puzzle. Explain this to me, he said to Dr. Grant. How does such a weak-looking creature have such strength? Dr. Grant moved to the center of the room, clearly excited to share her knowledge. Human beings evolved as persistence hunters on our homeworld. We had to chase prey animals for hours or even days until they collapsed from exhaustion. The general listened intently. His attitude completely changed from the arrogant bully he had been minutes before. This required dense muscle fibers and efficient cardiovascular systems, Dr. Grant continued. We also developed strong bones to handle the constant impact of running long distances. Katie sat down heavily in her corner chair, still trying to process everything. Her face hurt where the general had hit her, but her hand hurt worse from hitting him back. She had never punched anyone that hard in her life. Human muscle density is much higher than it appears, Dr. Grant explained. What looks like a small, weak frame can actually generate tremendous force when properly applied. General Vorthak nodded slowly, his scientific curiosity overcoming his wounded pride. And this female, she is trained in combat? Not combat, Dr. Grant said with a slight smile. Sports. Katie played rugby in college. It's a contact sport that teaches humans how to hit effectively and absorb impacts. The general's yellow eyes widened. This is her natural capability? Not enhanced by drugs or machines? Completely natural, Commander Morrison confirmed. And Katie is actually on the smaller side for human women. Many of our people are larger and stronger. Katie watched the general's expression change as the implications sank in. If their smallest diplomatic aide could floor him with one punch, what could their actual soldiers do? Ambassador Zilith seemed to understand the same thing. General, perhaps we should reconsider our assessment of human military capabilities. General Vorthak was quiet for a long moment, absently rubbing his stomach where Katie had hit him. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful rather than threatening. If this is true, he said slowly, then the Empire has greatly underestimated your species. Katie finally found her voice again. Maybe you should have asked questions before making threats. The general looked at her with what might have been the beginning of respect. Perhaps you are right, small warrior. Perhaps there is much we do not know about humans. Captain Torres stepped forward. General, with respect, Katie isn't even one of our warriors. She's a civilian diplomat. The weight of that statement settled over the room like a heavy blanket. If their diplomats could do this, what could their actual military do? General Vorthak sat back in his chair, looking like he was reconsidering everything he thought he knew about the universe. The threatening, arrogant alien was gone, replaced by someone who had just learned a very painful lesson about making assumptions. Katie touched her swollen lip gently and looked around the room. Everyone was staring at her like she had just performed a miracle. She wasn't sure if she felt proud or terrified. Dr. Grant moved closer to the table, her excitement growing as she saw the opportunity to educate the Crethari about human capabilities. General Vorthak, if I may continue explaining, there are many aspects of human physiology that might surprise you. The general nodded slowly, still holding his stomach. Please continue, it seems we have much to learn. Katie watched from her corner, still amazed at how different the alien sounded now. Gone was the arrogant bully who had threatened to enslave humanity. In his place sat someone who seemed genuinely interested in understanding what had just happened. To him. Human bones are incredibly dense, Dr. Grant explained. We evolved on a planet with higher gravity than many worlds, so our skeletal structure had to be strong enough to support our bodies under constant stress. Ambassador Zilith leaned forward with interest. Higher gravity? Our intelligence report suggested Earth had standard gravitational pull. Standard for you, perhaps, Commander Morrison said. But Earth's gravity is actually quite heavy compared to many inhabited worlds. It's one reason our space program developed slower than you might expect. We had to overcome significant gravitational resistance just to reach orbit. General Vorthak looked thoughtful. So your entire species developed under conditions that would be considered harsh training for our warriors. Exactly, Dr. Grant said with enthusiasm. And then, there's our muscle fiber composition. Humans have a mix of fast twitch and slow twitch muscle fibers that gives us both explosive power and endurance. Katie flexed her sore hand, still not quite believing she had knocked down an 8-foot alien. Her knuckles were swelling, but nothing felt broken. Her rugby training had taught her how to punch properly, but she had never expected to use it in a diplomatic meeting. Katie, Dr. Grant said, turning to her, would you mind showing the general your hand? Katie hesitated, then walked over to the table and extended her bruised hand. General Vorthak examined it carefully, his yellow eyes studying her knuckles and fingers. So small, he murmured. Yet it delivered more force than I thought possible. He looked up at her face, noting the split lip and bruised cheek where he had hit her. And you recovered from my strike faster than any creature should have. Humans are tough, Katie said simply. We don't break easily. Captain Torres stepped forward. General, Katie is actually smaller than average for human women, and she's not military trained. Our actual soldiers undergo years of conditioning and combat training. The implications of that statement were clear. If a small, untrained civilian could floor their general, what could actual human warriors do? General Vorthak sat back in his chair, looking like he was reassessing everything he thought he knew about the galaxy. Captain, how many humans like her are there? There are billions of us, Captain Torres replied, and most of the men are larger and stronger than Katie. Ambassador Zilith looked alarmed. Billions? General, our intelligence estimates put human population at a few million scattered across several worlds. Commander Morrison smiled slightly. Ambassador, Earth alone, has over 8 billion people, and we've colonized dozens of systems with millions more humans on each world. The Krathari delegation exchanged worried glances. Their entire strategy had been based on the assumption that humans were a small, weak species that could be easily dominated. General Vorthak was quiet for a long moment, absently rubbing his bruised ribs. When he finally spoke, his voice was completely different from the threatening tone he had used earlier. "I owe you an apology," he said, looking directly at Katie. "I struck you in anger and arrogance. That was wrong." Katie was surprised by the admission. "Thank you, General. I accept your apology. And I owe your entire species an apology," he continued, addressing the whole room. "I came here with preconceived notions about human weakness. I have been proven very wrong." Dr. Grant sensed an opportunity to build bridges. "General, this could be the beginning of real understanding between our species. We both have strengths that could complement each other." "What do you mean?" Ambassador Zelith asked. "Well, the Krathari clearly have advanced technology and space travel capabilities," Dr. Grant explained. "Humans have resilience, adaptability, and innovation. Working together, both species could accomplish more than either could alone." Katie was starting to feel the full effects of the adrenaline wearing off. Her whole body ached, and she was emotionally drained from the confrontation. But she could see that something important was happening. The meeting was transforming from a threat into an opportunity. General Vorthak stood up slowly, testing his balance. He was still sore, but he seemed to be recovering. "Dr. Grant, you speak of cooperation, but cooperation requires mutual respect." "Exactly," Commander Morrison said. "Something that was missing from our earlier conversation." The general nodded. "I came here believing the Krathari Empire was superior in all ways. I now understand that was foolish." He looked at Katie again. "Your young diplomat has taught me that strength comes in many forms." Katie felt herself blushing at the attention. "I just did what anyone would do when cornered." "No," General Vorthak said firmly. "What you did required courage, skill, and determination. Those are warrior qualities regardless of your size or species." Ambassador Zelith seemed eager to move the conversation toward more positive topics. "Perhaps we could discuss cultural exchange programs. It's clear both species have much to learn from each other." "I would support that," Commander Morrison said. "Understanding prevents the kind of misunderstandings we've had today." Dr. Grant was practically bouncing with excitement. "We could exchange scientists, study each other's worlds, share technological advances. The possibilities are endless." General Vorthak was looking at Katie with something that might have been admiration. "Young warrior, would you be interested in visiting the Krathari homeworld? I think our people need to meet humans like you." Katie looked around the room at her colleagues, then back at the general. "I think I'd like that. But maybe next time. We could skip the part where someone gets punched." The general's laugh was different now, warmer and more genuine. "Agreed. Though I suspect the punch will become legendary among both our peoples." Captain Torres grinned. "The day a human diplomat floored an alien general in a single hit? Yeah, that's going to be told for generations." Katie groaned. "Great. I'm going to be famous for hitting someone." "You're going to be famous for standing up to a bully," Dr. Grant corrected, "and for showing the galaxy that humans aren't as weak as they appear." Ambassador Zelith stood up. "General, I believe we should return to our ship and report these new findings to the Empire. Our entire approach to human relations will need to be reconsidered." General Vorthak nodded, then turned to Katie one more time. "Thank you, Katie Blake. You have given me a valuable lesson in humility. I will not forget it." As the Krathari delegation prepared to leave, Katie realized that everything had changed. What started as humanity's first contact with aliens had turned into something much more significant. She had inadvertently proven that humans were not the weak prey species the Krathari had assumed. Commander Morrison came over to her. "Katie, are you sure you're all right? That was quite an ordeal." Katie touched her swollen lip and smiled. "I'm fine, Commander, though I think I need some ice for my hand." And probably a commendation for your service record, he replied with a smile. What you did today may have changed the course of human history. As the aliens left and the conference room began to empty, Katie sat back down in her corner chair. Her broken tablet was still scattered on the floor, but somehow that seemed less important now. She had come to this meeting as a nervous young diplomat taking notes on the sidelines. She was leaving as the human who showed the galaxy that her species was not to be underestimated. Katie Blake smiled and began planning what she would say in her report. This was definitely going to be interesting to write up.